know we have staff throughout the room. We have our administrative staff, our advocacy staff, and our direct support staff. If you're with the ARC, if your paycheck is from the ARC, could you stand and be recognized? Oh, I know we have some DODD.
That looks good, right? That looks good, right?
Started. I should tell you, restrooms are out this way. If you want pop, you're welcome to the pop machines in the casino, which are in the hallway. We'll be serving lunch about noon. It'll be back here.
Thanks, Jan.
Network, get to know each other. When I grew up in church, we used to also say, hey, how are you? The neighbor next to us. Do that now. Introduce yourselves to each other, please.
What'd he say?
Introduce yourself. Really quick, no one knows this lady. Hi, I'm Mary. You are Mary. Are you from this stuff? No. Oh, okay.
I do have a couple things. A real quick special announcement. I want to recognize. That's a pretty big deal, right? So we're very excited about that. 49 years supporting people and their families. So that's pretty cool.
Again?
All right, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce our first group of speakers. That would be Director Kimberly Houck and Deputy Director Clay Widener. I'm always scared I'm going to say his last name wrong. So give him a big welcome, please.
I got to be really careful. I put my legs on my tripod. Oh. It always figures so that. What is it? My tripod, I broke one of the legs. So if I hit it, it falls. Oh, gosh.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We also brought Alan Showalter with us. We just brought him along. He's the deputy of our Medicaid division, and he is going to actually be talking in the next session with Jesse Wyatt from the Ohio Department of Medicaid. But we're going to talk about a few things this morning, and he is absolutely the best person to talk about that. So first, I want to thank you for inviting us, and thank Gary and David. We enjoy being here. We're excited to share what's going on at the department and answer any questions you might have. So things we're going to cover, we're going to talk some about the highlights over the last year, do a little bit of a budget recap, talk about our strategic plan, some waiver redesign work that's going on at the department, Appendix K in this session as well as the next session, and then a few projects that are happening. So I thought I'd start first with just some highlights over the last year and make sure that you all know what's going on at the department. One of the things that I am really excited about and have spent the majority of my career is around working with kids. So we at the department have partnered with our county boards and other providers and have supported over 27,000 families in our early intervention program, and that's across all 88 counties. So we have initiatives like we call it the MCAT, which is an assessment team, a multidisciplinary assessment team that works with youth and families, as well as a telepsychiatry project that has supported together over 300 youth in our state to be able to stay in their homes with their families and just get professionals involved earlier in their lives. Many of you, I'm sure, have been a part of our Ohio ISP, a new template that's rolled out across the state. That was Director Davis's main priority during his time at the department, and we now have over 10,000 plans in the system. And, you know, we're certainly, we know that there are lots of kinks and bugs to work out and things to talk about and ways to make it better. And we are certainly looking forward to providing even greater access for families and people served in that system. Learning Aid Ohio is a project that we brought online during the pandemic, and that was an opportunity to give families some funds to help with educational opportunities in their home, especially when schools were closed and kids weren't able to access their educational supports during the day. So that program has helped over 2,000 students this past year, and we're excited that the governor has prioritized that, and it will continue into the future. Our capital budget has provided over $25 million across the state. It's benefited more than 50 counties and 250 projects to build, buy, and renovate homes for independent living options. So we're really excited to have that project. You know, we've had it for a long time, but certainly not at this level, and we're excited to include that. And then the last thing I'll talk about is we did receive some one-time money from the government, and you might have heard about it, but it's called the Home and Community-Based ARPA funds. And so those were approved in the budget. So we have $56 million in one-time funds to do things like implement our blueprint recommendations, provide some training and support projects for people with disabilities. We want to really work to have accessible communities, including adult changing tables, which we were able to partner with some families during the budget to get through, and some outreach to underserved communities and workforce support. So we have gotten a partial approval from CMS, and we're looking forward to finishing that up with them next month and starting to get some competitive bids out and starting to spend that money. We have until March of 2025 to spend those one-time funds. So we released our strategic plan just a few weeks ago, and I thought I would just touch on that a little bit. It was really, really important to me and to the department that the voices of everyone were heard and reflected in our plan. So I'm sure all of you know that during my first year as director, we went to all 88 counties and had meetings with various advocacy groups, families, organizations, county boards, providers, and we learned a lot during that year. We used that information as well as budget testimony. I'm sure many of you in this room participated in that, as well as writing the governor and I letters, and I'm so appreciative of all of that. And again, we hope that you see your voice heard throughout our plan. You'll see we set it up a little bit differently this year. We used the Charting a Life course framework. So in the template, you'll just see high-level goals in areas like daily life and employment, community living, healthy living, advocacy and engagement, support to families, integrated support, safety and security, those sorts of things. And inside the plan, you'll read about our commitment to some really key initiatives and our goals for the next year. And those really include empowering Ohioans with developmental disabilities through active policy making, participation in policy making, decision making, and person-centered planning, ensuring that Ohioans get the support that they need at the right time. So, when I talk about some of our work with our youth, that certainly is important. And the next enhancing the DSP workforce, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about budget, but we certainly hope that through wages and other supports that we can enhance the work that they're doing. Demonstrating how technology can allow for a more independent life, and then, Alan will talk a little bit about redesigning our waiver system. So the budget. Since the last time I spoke with you all, we worked with Governor DeWine and the General Assembly, and I believe passed a terrific, tremendous, historical, and all those words, right, budget. We got $1.5 billion of new money into our system. With $1.3 billion going directly into rates to support our workforce. And I do want to say again that this would not have been successful without the focused and powerful advocacy that the DD community came together to provide. You all really did have a singular mission, and it worked. So I'm really proud of you and to be working for you. When Governor DeWine took office, the rates that supported wages for DSPs were at an average of $11.12 an hour. And this budget, along with the help of the county boards, will provide an average of $19 an hour over the next 2 years. Our ICF rates received a similar historic rate, plus a 200% increase for our ventilator add-on, so people who are dependent on ventilators. And Clay will talk about rates in just a minute, but the last thing I want to say about it is I wanted to point out that on our website you can find all of our budget information and our rate information there. So if you haven't, please take a minute to look at that. And the other thing I'll say about our website is if you see things that are confusing or might seem out of place or inaccurate, please let us know. We're putting up a lot of numbers right now, and so that can get a little twisted sometimes. So please let us know if you see something. Other investments outside of rates include $3.2 million per fiscal year in dedicated funding for technology. So if you subscribe to any of our publications and Memo Monday, I think it was just this week or maybe last week, you would have seen requests for proposals around regional hubs. So that's one of the things that we're going to try to offer through some technology money. We also received $5 million per year to better support youth with complex needs. And then a couple policy initiatives that passed during the budget that we were really, really proud to work with families and people living with disabilities to support. And that was increasing advocacy by ensuring that at least one person with a developmental disability is appointed to each county board of developmental disabilities. And then increasing accessibility by providing funding for adult changing tables in public places and local businesses. And we know that this will increase the number of places that families can visit and increase opportunities for community participation. So I'm going to turn it over to Clay now so he can talk about rates and all that fun stuff.
Nerd stuff, is that what you're saying? Hello everyone, I'm Clay Widener. Been with the department a few years now, I think 18 now. So just a few. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the retention payments that hopefully many of you, if not most of you in this room, are familiar with, and then transition into how that works into what the director talked about regarding rates and the money. So in terms of the retention, how many in here know what I'm talking about when I talk about the current? Okay, excellent, perfect. So I don't need to go over what that is. So just so everyone knows, just to clarify kind of the timeline, I know we've got a few questions on when do they end, what, some of that stuff. And as the director said, I think there is some information on the website, which should be up to date. But the current timeline is there will be one more payment. So in terms of the actual dates, that will occur around in November-ish. If you're a provider in the room or an agency provider that has to do reporting, they have to opt in by middle of October for the next quarter. That will be the last quarter. That's also when the reporting is due. And then we will issue that last payment towards the end of October and November. If you're an independent provider, and I know that there's many in this room, that's when you'll receive your payment that time frame, early November, mid-November. Agencies would then receive that payment at the same time. And then if you're an employee of an agency, you should receive your piece of that by the middle of December would be the last date. Then that will be the last retention payment of this particular program. That will expire with, as Appendix K, as I know will be a topic here later on, but as that transitions and that expires, those retention payments will expire as well. And I'm sure there'll be time for questions. If there's any questions about that, and I'm sure the next chunk will be some on rates, we can do that, I guess, at the end, right? I did think it would be interesting, and we pulled some information just real fast. So I've got here, you guys probably know, I think we put out in some communications, we paid out $175 million to date for these payments. With one more payment, that will be well over $200 million when it's all said and done. Over 8,800 independent providers received the payment, unique providers, and over 1,500 agencies. All said and done, when you look at the number of independent providers that received the payment, as well as the required reporting from our agencies on how many DSPs they paid, it was well over 50,000 DSPs that received at least some of this money over the course of time. So, obviously, depending on when people opted in and all that stuff, it may vary, but a pretty substantial impact over, really a year and a half, not even a year and a half, of when these actually started and we got the money out the door. So, that's it on the retention, and I think that kind of carries into the budget, right? And as the director said, I've been a part of a few historic budgets, all pretty much in the coverage line that was in place. But in terms of our HCBS, the waiver side, it was of the $1.5 billion the director mentioned. Most of that money is in waiver rates. $1.2 billion of the $1.5 over the biennium is in increases in home and community-based services payment rates. Okay, so. I think it would be helpful, I hope, without getting too crazy in the weeds and everyone feeling sorry for me. This is what I do on a daily basis, okay? Talk about what the percentages mean, what the rates look like, and hopefully put it into some context of what I know some of the questions we've received and some of the items that you may be interested in, okay? So, in terms of rates, right, when you hear the $18 and $19 an hour that the director mentioned, and that was a hot topic throughout testimony, right, that refers to our homemaker personal care rate, right, our rate model, I should say. So, when we talk about $18 and $19, that is a component, one component of a rate model that then determines what the final rate is for a particular service, right? So many of you may know that really on the agency side, $18 in the DSP wage component of the rate model actually ends up the agency rate's $33. Okay, so you can see all the stuff like there's assumptions built into a rate model when we say that. Okay, so the 31%, as you guys can see these percentages or heard these percentages before. So when I say 31% and 38%, what I'm referring to is the increase of the current HPC rate, that will go into effect on January the 1st, which will be 31% increase, ballpark. And then in July, next July, will be 38%. So the two things I want to clarify there, just so everyone hears it. The 38% is over current rates, okay? It's not 31% and then an additional 38%, okay? We've had a couple people ask that, and I'll go, exactly. I wish that was the case, but it is not. So when you hear 38%, it's 38% over today, okay? So really, from January to July, it's like a 6.5%, 7% bump. It's not a 38% bump, okay? All that stuff's out on the website with the actual rates and all that, but just I want to make sure that no one, is woefully disappointed in July when it's not 60% higher than today, okay? So, and I know most of you, the ARC, everyone, was part of the testimony and heard a lot of the conversation, especially again around the $18 and $19, right? And those percentages. And oftentimes when we're talking those percentages, it's solely focused for the most part on homemaker personal care. Okay? Again, that's the big service. I mean, that's 90% of our expenditures, right? But those $18 and $19 assumptions are only for that service. Okay? Then the way the budget worked and how the funding worked was all the other services that we currently have that are getting increased then got the same percent increase for the most part. Okay? A few exceptions like home delivered meals is a separate deal and a few others, but for the most part, most of the major services that anyone in here would be actively billing would see an approximate 31% increase in January and then 38% over current levels in July. Okay? So I just want to make that clear because we've got a few questions on what does $18 and $19 mean in context of Ohio Shared Living or in context of transportation or adult day services, right? So the 18 and 19 was solely the conversations around that component of the homemaker personal care rate model. And I know it's confusing. I can completely appreciate that. But really the important part in terms of how the rates are calculated is those percentages. All right? The second thing, and I know this came up because I got a few emails personally, was, when we do a rate model, right, it's always the middle part, right? I mean, you guys probably all know that we probably got many people who bill different rates in here that are all, every state of Ohio has different costs of doing business. And if you look at our wacko rule with all the different permutations you can bill, right, there's 8 different cost of doing business categories, right? So different rates. So when we say 18 to 19, that rate model that may be out there, it's smack dab in the middle of those, right? Then the rates are adjusted down for 4, up for 4, right? Based on a model. Then, as you guys know, there's group size adjustments. There's different unit service assumptions, whether it's a day, whether it's an hour, whether it's a quarter hour. So the main point is, if you did the math and you took your current rate times 131%, it may be 10 cents different than what is in the rule, right? Because when you're doing the multiplication, there's all kinds of decimals in the math, and there has to be some rounding, and then you have to smooth it out in terms of the different cost of doing business categories. So I know we've got some questions on that, even down to why is it 2 cents different? Okay, and that is why. All right, and that's not abnormal. That's not a mistake. Obviously, if something is $10 off, that would be an issue. That should not happen. But 25 cents on a daily rate, that is expected because you're dealing with trailing decimals and multiplying and dividing. You have to round it somewhere. Okay, so if you see that, of course, if you see something that's glaringly obvious that needs discussion, or you have a question, of course, let us know. But if it's around in the cents, in the quarter, or a penny, that type of stuff is expected, okay? So, in terms of the last thing I think on the rate piece of it, because I think, again, this ties to $18 and $19 narrative and conversation, is what is required. How many have heard that question before? What is required, right? Okay, so when we talk about it, as a state agency, right, as a rate, it's a rate model. You can reimburse for it, right? Obviously, when it's an average, right, that means some people are lower, some people have to be higher for it to average there in the middle, okay? So when we talk about it, it's a reimbursement model, okay? That's what a provider is being reimbursed for, right? You're an independent provider, and you get the rate, right? You get paid whatever the rate is, that's your rate, right? You're an agency, they get paid the rate, but what they pay their employees, how they structure their longevity, how they structure their business is an agency's discretion, right? They're the employer, not the state, okay? So, in terms of what are the requirements, right? We just want to be clear, there is not a required wage of $18 or $19. That is not a requirement, right? That when we say 18 to 19, it is the component of the rate model. However, the legislature wanted to make sure that the intent of the funds is clear, right? So there's two provisions in the budget that say that. One was part of the governor's introduced budget that made it clear that it was DODD and the governor's intent that these funds be used for workforce support and for wages, right? And that was the clear intention of the money from the very beginning. The legislature left that in and also added reporting requirements for our department as well as the Department of Aging and the Department of Medicaid to report on direct care wages and submit that report to the General Assembly, the Governor's Office, Office of Budget and Management, and anyone else that wanted to see it, right? So we will be required to provide a report to the General Assembly on the status of direct care wages in our system, right? Now, as many of you in this room may know, we've been doing reports and we've been doing surveys on direct care wages for a long time. It used to be National Core Indicators. Now we do a direct care compensation survey annually of providers. And we will continue to do that. And we are actively working with our sister agencies on what that will look like for their agencies so that, the language requires us to work with them to submit one report to the legislature. So we will be doing that. That is all part of our plan so that we will hopefully know that although there is no, legal requirement to pay 18 or 19, the legislature will get a report based on what is going on so they know at the end of the day how direct care wages look in the developmental disability system as well as the state overall because they invested well over $3 to $4 billion in total. We were a big chunk of that, but so were Ohio Home Care Waiver, and all the other services that went for the other agencies that are not in our budget. I think that's it. That's the thing. Okay. So if you have any questions, you're next. Yeah, we'll be here. I'm glad to answer anything around budget or rates.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about a big project going on in the department. We're calling it waiver redesign. So, and I'm really excited to address this. Our system is nearly 20 years old, and we have never really taken a deep dive look into the system that was stood up then. So, I thought I'd just start by saying it's comprised of many projects, many initiatives. Our blueprint for adult day and employment services is kind of connected under this umbrella. And that's a project where we started back in 2021 and met with a large group of stakeholders to create recommendations to really look at improvements, updates, and changes to adult day supports and competitive integrated employment supports. So we're continuing to work with that stakeholder group, and we have a lot to talk about and to figure out, and ways to support some people with some complex needs during their day. Another kind of piece under the umbrella is back in 2022, we looked at the Level 1 and Self-Waiver Simplification and Improvement Project, is what I think we called it. But we looked at things like, we brought self-directed transportation online, and we removed some of the spending caps in the Level 1 waiver, and we increased rates for a few services like social work, nutrition, and some waiver nursing delegation services. Alan's going to talk about our waiver modernization piece under the umbrella, and the other piece is the Appendix K flexibilities, which Alan might talk a little bit during this session, but then he and Jesse are certainly going to talk about during the next session.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am starting with the waiver modernization project today. I hope you have heard of it, and it's been going on for 9 months now. And we've been working with Deloitte, our consultant, on a variety of different initiatives to modernize the waiver program. I'm going to talk about 4 of them and our progress on those today. So first, we've been looking at assessments. We completed an initial review of the DDP assessment to see how well it identifies the needs of individuals and how well it predicts how much individuals utilize services and how much we are spending on those services for IO waiver enrollees. And we're then starting to explore other tools and identify ways to improve our predictions of needs and costs, whether that is improvements to the DDP or choosing another assessment, with a goal of using a single assessment and combining what the DDP and the AI both assess now. We're also looking at rates and provider billing. Right now, we're working with Deloitte to review the rates for HPC, shared living, remote supports, and assistive technology. Working with providers to understand the costs that go into providing those services to make sure that our rates are fairly compensating providers for their costs. We're also looking at how other states support these services, where their rates are, and making sure we have competitive rates with other states as well. In addition to looking at rates for shared living and remote supports, we're looking at the services more generally. We reviewed feedback from stakeholder groups that I hope some of you had the opportunity to participate in earlier this year. For participants of both shared living and remote supports, kind of hearing about the strengths and weaknesses of those services, and we're now working with Deloitte to develop recommendations on how we can improve both services to make it more responsive to the needs of individuals who actually receive the services. The final portion of the project we're working on now is looking at the county-state funding and waiver administration relationship. We have a county board work group where we surveyed county boards for their input on their roles in waiver funding and administration, and had our first meeting to share insights with them and begin discussions about waiver funding administration and making sure that we have a sustainable funding structure and division of labor to make sure the system is sustainable going forward as well. So that's the work we have completed and ongoing. Coming soon that I'd like to flag for all of you is that we are planning virtual webinars for October to learn more, to help stakeholders learn more about the project, and also to hear more from individuals about the assessment process, to hear your experiences, and hear what people think could improve the assessment process to make sure that your team is getting the information they need to ensure you're getting the appropriate services. We'll be sending information out about that soon. We also have a live mailbox that I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of as well. It's redesign at DODD.ohio.gov, where we're happy to answer any questions, to receive comments on any of these topics, or even if you just want to make sure that we have your contact information for invitations to future information, please feel free to reach out to us there.
Could you repeat that address?
Sure. It's redesign, REDESIGN, and that's at DODD.ohio.gov.
All right, and like I said, I think Alan and Jesse are going to talk about Appendix K next, but I just want to say, I hope that you all have seen through our work that the administration and our department really has prioritized improving supports for people with disabilities and families coming out of the pandemic. You know, we learned a lot of lessons and we benefited from those lessons, and we hope that, you know, that you can see that through our work and our efforts. I just want to make sure that you know about a few things for families out of the department. You know, we have the Family Advisory Council homepage on our website. We have our Family Advisory Council core group that meets. We have a family organization forum. We have a Facebook forum. We have a monthly newsletter called DODD Family Connect. We certainly are active on social media. We have a DODD Supporting Families webpage. We have a Family Resource Network of Ohio, the FRNO website, where, you know, various resources are listed. And then, you know, we have the Ohio Family Network, which will help connect people with disabilities and their families to local information and resources. And if you need any information on any of that, you can always reach out to us, Corey Ferguson or Meredith Mendoza, Nate Turner. They're all at the department to support you and your needs, and you know, help make sure that if you have questions, they get to the right person in the department. We certainly hope you know that we're here to support you and your needs. And that wraps it up, Gary. I think if anybody has questions for us, we're here.
Could you address, and if you have questions, it would really be helpful to come up to the mics. If you're not able to come up to the mic, raise your hand and we'll come to you. Could you address how the rates correlate to the funding ranges in the IO waiver and then the self waiver and the level 1?
So we have, we posted updated waiver amendments for public comment earlier this month, and those all include updated funding ranges for all the waivers that are being increased by the same percentages as the rates. So individuals should be able to receive the same amount of services now with the higher rates and still stay within their waiver funding ranges.
Remember, if you have a question, come up to the mics and we'll just take turns from one mic to the next.
Get him,
You
Becky.
got there first.
Get him, Becky.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marcella Singleton from Community Bound Agency. And I want to know, we are currently paying our DSPs $17 an hour. And I want to know if, is there something else that's for agencies like myself that's already at that rate? I know that the rate increased, but is there something else that's coming down the line? Because we're already there. And then also, that was my other question. My other question is, as far as the HPC, is that only for the DSPs that's out for the home personal care, or is that also for our DSPs that's in our ADSs?
So first question, in terms of, is there anything else for agencies or providers that are already doing something above what they were getting reimbursed for? I mean, there isn't anything particular other than your reimbursement is going to go up, right, by 38% in July and 31% in January, right? So, but there is no special, like, you know, something extra for ones that are already doing above what the current rate model reimburses for. You know, so, but we do understand probably your experience, and we have heard from others as well that are in a similar situation as you in terms of that. But other than just your reimbursement going up for your typical services, there wouldn't be anything in addition to that. In terms of ADS and the other services, those payments, reimbursement rates will go up by similar percentages as well. So that goes to what I was trying to explain earlier, in the sense of the $18 to $19 an hour. was really in the context of the homemaker personal care rate model. However, that percentage that resulted in that service was then applied to adult day services or vocab or Ohio Shared Living, some of our other major services that are billed. So you should see increased reimbursement for those services as well, around 31 and 38% in January and July.
And I'm sorry, the last thing, you guys' efforts have been noticed and beyond appreciated and has been helpful for our
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, just to give you guys a heads up, you are streaming. If you're on Facebook Live, it will be available for 30 days, and then I will have it uploaded onto my YouTube channel. So down the road, if somebody needs a copy, I will have a copy of this conference.
Thanks, Becky.
No, my battery's died.
I love being on Facebook, by the way.
So, and questions off of Facebook, okay, on my stream is the person with a disability on the county board, is that in addition to the number they already have, or is that replacing one of the people already on the board?
So it's not replacing anything, it's just a requirement that at a minimum, every county board must have one person, and that person can be appointed either by the probate or the commissioners.
I think in my county, I could be wrong, I think we have a standard, we have 12 people. So would that mean now we can have 13 people?
Oh, no, it's the same amount, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. It's the same number of people on the board.
Okay,
So when somebody, when their term is up and they roll off, then they could be replaced.
is that why you don't have a specific date?
That's right.
Okay, because I do know they have terms. So now we'll have a.
No one, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but, it is not our intent that anyone's term has to end early.
I understand.
Or that anybody be kicked off the rate.
So we'll have a parent of an adult child with a waiver, or disability rather, and then a parent with a minor child of disability as a requirement, and then a disabled person themselves as a requirement on the board.
So Jeremiah, how did that all change?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's a great question, but it went through many iterations, and I'll let him give you the real answer.
Sorry, I think the quick answer is that the language is posted, and if it's not on our budget webpage, we can add it. So the language is pretty clear starting in 2025. That'll be a new requirement. Nobody kicked off, nobody rolled, but the basic is that there will be a person with a developmental disability, there will be a family member, and then the other ones are really up to the appointing authorities to fill as they see fit locally. But we can share the language, we can make sure it's posted.
And what is she referring to?
The county board.
County board.
Yeah.
So every county board of developmental disabilities has a board that governs them, and so it's on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
When you refer, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
When you refer to sister, the guy in the middle, I'm sorry, I forget names. The guy in the middle. The guy in the middle.
I've been called first.
When you refer to a sister agency, what are you referring to? Is this the Medicaid side, or is there somebody that we don't know about? Is there?
No, I can answer that one for you. Yeah, so we refer to sister agencies as our other state agencies or other state partners. So like Addiction and Mental Health, the Department of Education, the Department of Medicaid. There's 26 cabinet agencies under the governor. And so when we refer to a sister agency, we're referring to our state partners.
I thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
Hi, my name is Jeff Miser. My wife Jody is, like many of you, just amazing with our daughter. We wanted to talk about the waiver assessment and ask you if you think there's any hope in the future that how they determine the rate could be adjusted. Because, for example, we really fall into an area where, it's not right. Like on this waiver rate, it says it's like they're in like 3 categories. I believe you're rated 3. Well, our daughter falls 18 in the 22 categories. She's a 3. She is fully disabled, helpless without my wife. and 18 of the 22 categories, and yet she's rated in the lowest rate. And that's just not right, you know, and is there any hope y'all are gonna be able to get that corrected in the future? And I don't know if this was the right opportunity or the right question time, but it's just terribly unfair how these are set. Because, like I said, 18 of the 22 categories, our daughter would, we've talked about it, if we would both have a massive heart attack, if she was alone in the house, she would literally not have much time. She can't do nothing. 18 and 22, and yet she's the lowest rate. What do we know about that?
So, what I think you're looking at is our extraordinary care assessment tool.
Yeah.
And so that tool is specifically to determine if a parent may be eligible to be a direct care worker after the first of this year. And Jesse and I are going to talk about that a little more at 11. But then, you know, in addition to that, we are looking as part of our waiver monetization work, you know, at how assessments identify funding ranges and services necessary for individuals. And a lot from parents about concerns with that process, and that's definitely something we're looking at through that process. So yes, I do hope we'll have some improvements there.
Did I explain the question correctly?
Yes.
How we're locked in the lowest rate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I fully
But
understand.
you guys are doing a great job. There's been so much improvement, and also want to give Becky a quick shout out. Her group is awesome.
Good morning, my name is Tina Gagan. My brother is John Gagan. He has special needs. What I heard today is that you have a goal to have the disabled stay in their homes. $250,000 was for renovating. ARPA funds, $56 million, and you have to spend that money March of 2025. Healthy living and safety and security for everyone that is disabled. Empowering the disabled to have a voice regarding their needs, wants, and what makes them happy. $1.5 billion, with $1.3 going to REIS to support the workforce. $3.2 million for technology. $5 million per year supports people with complex needs. And we're still relying, and I'm going to piggyback off that gentleman, we're still relying on people to make decisions on what our loved ones get. Why our loved ones never been here before. But I'm sitting there watching my brother that gets some pretty low pay. And there's not anyone in this room that can take care of my brother as well as I can and his mother. So I hope to hear some changes that are going to be made for that particular area, because I find that it's extremely important. And after hearing, all of the great things you're doing, I'd like to see that change, and I'd like to advocate for that change, because he is my number one. And I would like to say, thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, as we traveled and talked to families, and many of you in this room, that is why we are looking at shared living and making sure that it is in a place where it can support families to care for their loved ones. So, as we work through that with the contractor, we'll be sure and keep you all updated and get your feedback.
Hi, I'm Jackson. My name is Tamara Creamer. This is my very first time here. And I just want you to know that, and I'm just going to be honest, and because my son's 23, and I've never had to live by a government program until my son was born, and now if anyone says there's a government program, I will run as far as I can. because the part that has been so frustrating is the system that we've been forced to live in is the most unnatural system to a normal family unit that I have ever experienced in my life. Why you would take my career from me and force me to live under poverty income guidelines and try to take my car from me when I had no one else to leave the home, to earn a living, to provide insurance for me. We had to lose everything. He could live on a bad Medicaid system from people that ruined his teeth because they practiced on him. His permanent teeth are destroyed. And I'm like, I know what's so hard for me is to just be cool. But the problem is, it's 23 years. I just got off a phone call last Thursday with our county. He's in the lowest, I'm alone, and he's in the lowest bracket for shared living. The county we lived in before lied to us about qualifying for shared living for a few years and said, oh, well, he's the client, not you. You have no rights. And mothers need to have rights. If these county boards are lying to us, and I will say, I had to go to my state senator, and when I got their ear, they were pissed about what the county boards were doing to the families. And they went in, so I do applaud the governor and our state government in that way. But just last week, we're on the lowest budget, and I said, I'm having to finance my food on a credit card. I can't do this. And they're telling me that I need to learn how to live within a budget. They never talked, they never said his name. They just talked about their budget. Well, the budget, you need to learn to live within the budget. So there's a couple of questions that I have for you. Now, I was an accountant. I was a professional before my son was born. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys, why in the world do you use poverty income guideline for anything? Why don't you say, here's your medical for your child, because we already know they are going to use the system way more than the healthy child is. Go to work, do everything you can, earn as much as you can, we're going to support you. But instead, you take away our ability to contribute to our 401ks during the most important years of our life, our 20s, our 30s, and our 40s. So now we're broke in our 50s and our 60s, and we have nothing but poverty to look forward to in our retirement. You take away our ability to stay relevant in the workplace. You take away our ability to meet people in the community. There's all of these things that when you took me out of the workplace, I lost connection to society. And all of a sudden, my life went to making $20 decisions. And I was stuck in an apartment. And that's why I'm saying, like, this is just so weird. So why don't we do something like everybody else does? Go to work, here's your insurance, and we're filing our taxes. Let's check a little box, and all the money that we make in taxes, have it come right back here and fund what we're going to do. Let's just check a box and let us work. I mean, I know, it's like, I'm just so, so that was one of my questions, and the other question I had is, can you please consider a special rate for single-parent households? Because I have no one else going out to get insurance for us, to have a secondary thing. We are 100% a shared living home. The other thing that I wanted to say is my attorney told me that if he takes a job and works, and they do minimum wage for a couple months and then he quits or he can't do it, Social Security will take away his father's disability and reassess him at minimum wage. So now all this work of 23 years and I've done 100% alternative therapies, what did I do it for? Because if he takes a job, now I hurt him financially for the rest of his life. So those are just some of the things that I would like to ask. When you do your tool, I read it. I think that it's unfair that you only give points for people that use doctors and medical programs because they're so far behind the alternative holistic community. I do so many things for Jackson. He got vaccines. He stopped moving. We did a technique called patterning. We did it with the College of Worcester. We had 20 volunteers, and in 2 weeks, he started moving again. But I could get no support from any doctor. And so we had to do all this on our own, and that's pretty much, it's been a lonely walk, but I just want to say I'd like to see what we really do as parents being reflected in that tool, because to give him credit for, oh, does he go to physical therapy? Does he go to speech therapy? Oh, you get points for that. Yeah, but everything I do, I'm awake all through the night when he's sick. But a personal care person can come in and work for 4 hours and make more money than I do in 20 hours.
Can
last
we-
one, because I was just curious. I don't like to complain and not offer.
No, you're doing
Okay.
well.
Okay.
I know we've got to get to the next,
Okay.
I'm sure
Please-
they'll stick around.
Oh, I was just gonna say, please consider
Yes.
allowing homemaker personal care for a shared living mom if we're doing homemaker personal care activities, even if it's 4 hours a day, to supplement shared living as a possibility. Thank you.
You're wonderful, thank you.
So Alan's going to talk a little bit about some exemptions in the shared living rule in the next hour, so I'll let him do that. But let me just say, thank you for sharing your story with us. And, I know it takes a lot to stand up in front of this many people and talk about your life and your journey, and I appreciate you for doing that. And we really are looking at the shared living service, and we're looking at the DDP assessments and some of those things. And hopefully next time we meet with you, we'll be able to have a conversation about where we are with some of that work.
Good morning. My name is Jenny O'Brien. I live in Hamilton County. I have my son Braden over here. I have a question about shared living versus HPC. So our family was kind of forced into doing shared living right when he turned 18 because we had searched for years to find a provider and no one could meet his needs. So he's a 2-on-1 support, but we're forced to do shared living and one of us be a natural support, which that's fine. We're going to do that for Braden because we love our child. But that also means one of us cannot work a full-time job, so we don't get the reimbursement we would get. We're both professional parents. So we're giving up a lot doing that. So one question is, are there any plans to consider 2-on-1 support with shared living? Well, we're up 8 times a night with him. We take turns getting up because he's turned over. During the day, we don't get a break. So no one can come in our home. It takes extensive training. We would have to train somebody for weeks to be able to take a respite. We tried it once at a respite center, and he called us multiple times begging us to come get him because he didn't feel safe. So we will never do that again. I was in Vegas trying to have fun, and we ended up picking him up. I had to have a family member pick him up because he was so miserable. So I wanted him to have the best life possible. So in considering having an option to do HPC, he does have a behavior add-on support and 2-on-1 support. Would parents that are doing the care have a limit? Like, would we be set at 40 hours? Because he's range 9. I've appealed to the state to get his range changed, and the state did ask the county to reassess his ODD, and he became a 9 from a 4.
So first, I'm sorry to hear about your respite experience. Again, Alan is going to talk about some details with the shared living, some changes that we're making about some exemptions, and it sounds like you could possibly fall into one of those exemptions, which would allow you to move to an HPC. But again, he is going to talk about that in just a few minutes.
Okay, thank you so much for everything you guys do. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, my question is to piggyback off of some of what the other parents or providers have been saying. I'm a parent. My daughter is total care, which is similar to with the first person, the young gentleman that came up. So it's not a medical waiver. So the assessment, I put it up on my phone before I came up here. The questions are very simple, but it's more towards behavior to get your level up. So that's why I came up here. So with the assessment, the tool has not been changed. It's just so if my daughter, if the police came out to my house or she was getting psychiatry care, she'd go up to level 6. Well, she should be a level 6 anyway. If a fire happened in my home and I'm not at home, my daughter would die. She cannot move without me.
Right.
So when I say total care, because I'm a nurse and a medical assistant, she has a feeding tube, I have life support in my home. I do not get the money for that. So I'm doing 2 jobs. And I have to, or I could not live it off. I would probably be out on the street when the young lady said that I would not be able to have a car. So the assessment tool that is being used by, I'm in Montgomery County, is just not helpful. Me and her SSA went over it. We answered every question. Only way I was up to a level 6 was if psychiatry was coming out to my home. I'm like, okay, well, my daughter is nonverbal because she has a brain disease that she would die from this. So she, like when I say total care, she's on a feeding tube. I have to change that. She has to be changed. She has to be alternated moved so she won't get bed sores. It's a lot. No, I know I'm not saying I need to be compensated for that, but it does need to be higher. So the tool for the assessment needs to be changed because you don't have it for a medical waiver. So the parents that are with shared living that have children that are total care, the assessment don't assess that at all. It's just only for, it's like a base rate. Like everything is marked. I put feeding tube on there, that she has a hospital bed, she has a pressure mattress to stop from sores, she has a nurse come out, but I couldn't have nobody watch my daughter, like from home care for nursing, because if I did, then that would take away from my pay. And I'm like, you can't even make it make sense, because somebody has to be there 24 hours. So the assessment, I don't know if that can be changed. That's the only way for providers or shared living that we would get an increase, because it's not changed and there's no way I can change her level.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks again. That's one of the things that we absolutely are looking at, and I know that doesn't help you today, but please know that we're looking at that for the future.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you for sharing.
Really quick for you. On the ODDP, first question you can answer later, why does it matter where they live and who they live with?
That's right.
One of you guys can answer this maybe now or later, I don't care. The overtime rate. I understand we're a contract employee, so we don't really fall into that fair labor law, so you don't have to give us time and a half. But what is it based off of?
Right.
What is it based off
Right.
of? And our behavior add-on, that stuff, should we get the add-on, the overtime pay, I guess I'll call it, on top of behavior add-on? And is there some kind of percentage at it? Because it's definitely not time and a half.
Sure.
So what is the overtime rate?
Sure, yeah, no, overtime is always a fun topic, as I'm sure many of you know. So overtime, it's calculated, it does tie to the rate, the conversation I just had. So overtime is tied to the wage component of the rate model. So I'll give you an example. The independent provider base rate in July will be roughly $30, ballpark, rounding up, right? The DSP wage is 19 of that, right? So the overtime rate will be half of the 19. It will be 30 plus 950, roughly 39.50, right? So to your point on the rate model, like I was talking about earlier, wages is only one piece of it. So like if you're working overtime out, McDonald's or somewhere, it's only on your wages, right? It's not on the benefits they pay. It's not an admin percent that McDonald's is paying, whatever, maybe a bad example. But so that's how it's calculated. So today, that's how it is. Add-ons do not have any correlation to overtime, so there is no extra. It's on top of that rate.
Is there any way that we can figure this out ourselves?
You mean in terms of what the rate?
That we can actually do the math ourselves.
Well, you can in the sense of you would take your rate and knowing that the base rate is 19 divided by half and add it to that total. So yes, you can. Right, but then it gets adjusted back and forth, right? So again, it's the same conversation of why, if you do the math, you might be 3 cents off, but you would be close.
Well, right now it's like $4 off if you do take the time and a half and figure it out that.
Yeah, I don't think you're using, we can take it off because David's gonna, hit me with that clicker there, but we can,
Question
yeah.
for the next session? Okay, go ahead.
One more, we got.
I appreciate that. I have 2 disabled daughters. I take care of my brother who's had 3 strokes and he's a vet. He lives in the home as well. I guess I'm a little bit, it'll be a short question. I feel like I'm defending Ohio shared living. And I don't know why we're doing that. Because you can't give DSPs. We're all hearing about the shortage of DSPs. But for some reason, you've increased their pay. And you're decreasing mine every time I have one of these DSPs. I can't believe you're doing that, quite frankly. I don't know the justification for taking away 2 days of pay when I can finally have my provider coming home for 4 hours. I will then have the other 20 hours of that day where I won't get paid 2 days a week. So I'm not sure the thinking of that. It doesn't sound right, and I'm not sure how you justify that. Second of all, when you assess the DDP and the waivers, are you grandfathering all of us in who already have met those qualifications and don't want reassessed? I don't want reassessed. I don't want my waiver to be gone. Are you going to grandfather us in, or during your assessment and your redesign, you're coming back out to reassess us?
So let me first go back. Shared living is getting the same percent increase as HPC in the rate increase that's coming up in January. So you will see an increase in your rate. So that's one I want to make sure. I think, and correct me if you're wrong, or if I'm wrong, I think you're talking about receiving shared living and HPC on the same day. Okay, so we are changing that. I don't know if Alan can talk about that, but we are changing that to be respite. A residential respite can happen on the same day as shared living.
In the home?
In the home, absolutely.
So my provider has to qualify for respite?
Correct. And so we are going to work on that, and we're going to help figure that out, how HPC providers can become residential respite providers. CMS would not allow us to continue HPC and shared living on the same day because they're considered the same service. So we worked really, I just want to say, we worked really hard to come up with an alternative so you wouldn't lose that service. And so your provider will have to maybe go through some steps to become a residential respite provider. But we are willing to help with that at the state, and we want that to be seamless for people.
And I email, that's about what I wanted to follow on my behalf. To continue to have Jennifer 4 days, 2 days a week about that.
I think our time is up. It probably was up a while ago. I want to thank everyone for your questions, and I hope that we were able to provide some new information for you. And please, if you have things going on in your county that you're struggling with, reach out to the department. We are here to help. We have technical assistance and guidance teams that certainly will reach out to your county board and help work through some of those problems with you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I didn't say it before, but the only person Kim answers to is the governor. She's right up there. Well, she listens, but that's her boss. Here comes the story. So I neglected to introduce 4 people that I'm very fond of. We have 4 of our board members here. Joy Schuster back in the back, Blaine Brockman, John Hanna, and Connie Calhoun, right over here. They are members of our governing board. Thank you very much. We talked about sister agencies a little bit ago. People First of Ohio is co-sponsoring this event. Can the People First members stand up? There they are. And then Adam back here is the president.
I know.
Thank you very much.
Because I saw that on
We also wanted to thank our county boards of developmental disabilities. When we talk about retention payment, and those of you who have heard David and I speak before, 60% of a waiver is covered by the federal government. 40% is covered for the most part by your county board levies. The retention payments were made possible because the county boards put up the 40% match to draw down funds for the retention. With the rate increases coming in, we did a lot of negotiation at the State House. We were able to get an extra $1 an hour because the county boards ended up and put in an extra $1 an hour. So we want to thank the county boards of developmental disabilities.
All right, so before I introduce the next two speakers, I do just want to make a quick sort of announcement, I guess. Obviously, you've heard some of these questions that people are asking and concerns. I will say that there's definitely some confusion out there when we start talking about the extraordinary care instrument tool that has nothing to do with adults in our waiver system. It's only for minors. So I would encourage you to talk to other families within the audience, talk to the professionals in the room. If you think something doesn't quite sound right, we should just sit down and talk about that, right? I'm not saying the system's ever going to be perfect for everyone, but it is a system that we all strive to improve upon every day, okay? So it's my pleasure to introduce the next speakers, and that would be Alan Showalter, who is the Deputy Director, DODD and Medicaid, and Jesse Wyatt, who is the Director of Medicaid.
I won $70. Very good. And have a cigarette.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for engaging in this important discussion. Really appreciate it. My name is, David mentioned, my name is Jesse Wyatt. I'm Deputy Director for Long-Term Services and Support for the Ohio Department of Medicaid. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the Appendix K process and specifically the caregiver rule as it's becoming known as. So we're going to get a little introduction and a background as far as an agenda. I'm going to talk about our stakeholder engagement process, the rule itself, and then additional DODD rule changes. And we'll kind of go back and forth between myself and Alan. And our goal in this process is to strengthen and preserve Ohioans' access to home and community-based services. And we're doing that by focusing on those who provide direct care and services to individuals while working to address workforce shortages. And to give a little background, the Appendix K, if you're not familiar, is an emergency authority provided from CMS. So Appendix K is an amendment to the home and community-based waivers. And during the federal PHE, we can ask, and we did, CMS for several exceptions to various requirements that we have in place. The Appendix K authorities are going to end at the end of this calendar year. So as of today, all the flexibilities contained in the Appendix K authority is still in effect. So I just wanted to give that background for anyone who may not be familiar with it. But there are the process we've been through, and we'll go into more depth here. But we really have done several different virtual webinars over the last 6 months. We've had a lot of informal communications with many individuals and groups. We've had a lot of written communication. We created email box, just for Appendix K questions. And we've given draft documents such as an informal draft of the caregiver rule well before it even went to clearance. And so we tried to engage with stakeholders about the unwinding of these Appendix K flexibilities. Some of them, the CMS will not let us continue, but many of them can be continued, and certainly one of the ones we received the most feedback on by far is the caregiver rule. So to go a little bit more, again, we worked the three departments, the two here plus the Department of Aging, so the Department of Medicaid, the Department of Developmental Disabilities, and the Department of Aging, because these Appendix K authorities really affected all three of those programs, those 7 different home and community-based waivers. And so the three departments have regularly worked together to determine which flexibilities CMS would allow to continue and which ones they would not allow to continue. And then further evaluate some of the flexibilities have 0 utilization at all. So it wasn't necessarily important to maintain those flexibilities, while others it was clearly very important to maintain, such as the caregiver rule, allowing direct service workers who were also legally responsible, such as parents of minor children and spouses. And again, we really have made a concerted effort to reach many people. We've had a lot more comment on the caregiver rule than is typical, and I do mean by a large margin. Again, we've held several webinars starting back in March, actually. I think we've held 9, and then we held one yesterday. But we've also talked about the Appendix K authority unwinding and the caregiver rule at events such as this, and several informal conversations to anyone really who reached out and asked for further conversation. And public communications, just this week, we released another informal draft of the caregiver rule. We do hope to go to, take the next step here soon in the rulemaking process. But we have provided time and time again several different drafts and provided feedback, written, verbally, virtually, in person, quite a bit over the last 6 months. And I'm going to pass to Alan here to start talking about the rule a little bit.
So as Jesse mentioned, ODM and DODD and our partners at the Department of Aging have been working on this draft rule since early this year. We worked by creating an initial rough draft to allow the continuation of this flexibility under the new CMS requirements outside of the Appendix K process. Based really on informal communications received from stakeholders through the PHE process, hearing from families and individuals and providers about why and how they thought this needed to occur, continue to occur. And so what we're planning to do today is kind of provide you a summary of the feedback we've received on that initial rough draft and on the other drafts that we've released in the process from June through August of this year. Jesse mentioned we received significant feedback on this rule, and we have made modifications based on the feedback we've received as well. The summary we're talking about today is not going to be inclusive of every comment we've received, but it is pretty comprehensive about the kind of themes of feedback.
And to touch on the topic of extraordinary care, the extraordinary care is a CMS requirement. If we are to reimburse parents of minor children or a spouse as a direct care worker for a waiver participant. It's a very specific requirement. Some of the requirements from CMS are much broader. They're what's known as an assurance. So the state, for any of these home and community-based waivers, actually has to make several assurances to CMS. And that's no different for a legally responsible individual who's also a direct care worker. We also have to make those assurances to CMS for those individuals as well. And those are broader, and certainly there's some leeway in this, how the state accomplishes those assurances. But this one is not that. This one is a very specific requirement, and we simply are unallowed to use federal dollars to pay for an individual who is a parent of a minor child or a spouse to become a direct care worker unless the care provided or the care needed, I should say, is extraordinary in nature. And one thing to keep in mind there, just to give an example of what CMS has outlined as extraordinary care. For example, a newborn infant cannot bathe themselves. That's irregardless of any disability that infant may have. All infants, none of them are able to bathe themselves. So that example would not be extraordinary care, but perhaps a much older child who still needs help bathing, that would be allowable because that would be considered extraordinary care at the point where in general children are starting to be able to bathe themselves. We have made some changes to extraordinary care. I think there's some additional slides. And I do apologize. My eyesight is, I need some new glasses. I think they got flipped a little bit from our earlier presentation. Sorry. So we have received some feedback just in general that if my loved one is enrolled in the home and community-based waiver and they're authorized for said service, that should be all that's required. And unfortunately, I understand that line of thinking, but it just isn't for two reasons. One, there are specific CMS requirements, such as only reimbursing for extraordinary care that we can't controvert, we have to follow. And then additionally, we have to meet these broader waiver assurances that we make to CMS. So it is the state's duty and obligation to ensure we're meeting these assurances, such as health and safety. And that's a big one. And so even though CMS gives the state some leeway, if we already accomplish and achieve those assurances, what we have put forth, we do believe will achieve those assurances. So that's the relationship we have with CMS, since the majority of the payment for Medicaid waiver services is the federal share. We really do have to follow their requirements. Even if we have a lot of leeway in how we accomplish them, we still have to meet those requirements. And so that's why we can't just say, well, you're enrolled and you're authorized, so it's no different than any other provider. It is different, frankly, because CMS makes it a little different, and we're doing our best that we think will meet all of the CMS requirements. I'm going to pass out.
So one of the other areas we've received a lot of feedback on is the question of appeal rights. And the rule draft says that a decision by ODM or DODD or ODA or our designees like county boards related to whether someone qualifies under this rule to serve as a provider or a direct care worker is not subject to appeal. And we did receive a lot of feedback that requests to be added. Federal requirements for when the state is required to offer appeal rights do not cover this type of decision. But DODD and ODM are working to enhance kind of our grievance and oversight processes to ensure that constituent concerns from individuals and families are met through this process. For DODD waivers, we are planning that persons served, families, or providers can reach out to our Medicaid waiver technical assistance team to review any home and community-based service issue, like whether a parent is appropriately a direct care worker under the school. And our TA team will reach out to the county, will gather whatever additional information is needed from the family or the county, and work with the county to make sure that the action is in compliance with the Medicaid rule here.
And back to the extraordinary care tool apologies, I think we must
You know what I mean?
inadvertently swap some slides, to place some slides.
Right.
So we have made changes to the extraordinary care tool. One of them originally, we were going to have it apply to everyone. And as was, pointed out through feedback, that is not the specific CMS requirement, and we agreed. So we made the change. The extraordinary care instrument will only apply to parents of minor children or spouses. And certainly I could see logic that it's not really applying to spouse based on the example I gave earlier, but that is the CMS requirement. And so we have received a lot of feedback in addition to that particular nuance around the extraordinary care tool itself. Especially a lot of feedback over when that age range should begin, where it is possible extraordinary care would be needed. For example, the bathing example I gave, is that 4, is that 5, is that 8, is that 10? When should it start? Now, the teams at ODM and DODD and aging, really did take a deep dive into this originally when they crafted the tool. And so they used several resources, including pediatricians, to come up with those age ranges in the first place. They also looked at other states. Other states have started to publish their tools as well, and our tool really fits in pretty well with that. But we did receive a lot of feedback on when that age of extraordinary care being needed would begin. And we received feedback that it should be lower, and we received feedback that it should be higher. A lot of feedback both ways. So there was some other feedback too on the tool, general formatting and some specific things on definitions. As Alan said, this doesn't really cover all the feedback, but it is the bigger themes that we received. And so we have made some minor changes. We hope to share the updated tool here soon with everyone. But we have made some minor changes, but in general, to those age ranges, we've pretty much kept them the same. So just a heads up on that.
What are the age ranges?
Well, so the tool is available. I mean, there's several different categories of assistance. And so it varies a little bit depending on the type of assistance, such as help with bathing, help with eating, ambulation, et cetera, et cetera. There's really, I forget the exact number, but maybe 15 or even 20 different kind of categories. And so it depends on the category as far as the age range, as far as when it's possible for there to be extraordinary care. Just to go back to my earlier example, for example, a newborn infant, regardless of disability, always needs help bathing. So the idea is that that's not extraordinary care. So in that instance, the age range is not going to be 0, right? It's going to start at some point later. And to be honest, I forget the exact age when it starts on the tool, but they are there. And we have shared the tool in the past, and we will be again very shortly. So if you're not signed up for those email blasts, make sure you sign up so that we have an opportunity to review it. But we have received significant comment on it already from several individuals. I'm sure some of you. Again, some saying the ages should be starting lower and some saying they should be starting higher. We're pretty comfortable where we're at, and I think in part because we did a pretty good job initially involving experts for childcare and getting their opinion and incorporating their opinion and comparing to where we're at to some other states that have already published their rule as well.
That didn't answer my question, did it? We had to go around that.
So the draft rule does also have a maximum of 40 hours per individual served in the rule as well. We received a lot of feedback on that. Generally, we heard opposition to maximum hours per week limitations for both parents and minor children and spouses. So effective as of the current rule draft, after January 1, there will be the 40-hour per week limitation in the rule, but DODD will have the authority to approve more hours than that. And we're working through what sort of that request process would be. But I would, I suspect it would be for someone who's assessed to need more than 40 hours of care per week. And the county and the family and the team agree that there's not a minimum able provider to provide those additional hours. It also helps to remember the 40 hours a week may be further limited if the person is assessed to need less than 40 hours a week. So if your assessment finds you only need 20 hours of care per week, that would be the maximum number of hours the parent would be permitted to provide as well. This doesn't change for DOD specific waivers. We've gotten a lot of questions about this as well. For parents serving adult children, this does not change any authority that was in place before the public health emergency. This is really only for parents of minor children or spouses. Any of the requirements that we're talking about today.
Apologies again for the slide. But, so we have received feedback that we should also allow foster parents to receive reimbursement to be a direct care worker. Unfortunately, federal requirements simply prohibit this. So a foster parent is not allowed to receive reimbursement through this rule.
Hey, Jesse, can I ask a question on the side?
Yes.
It's kind of related. What about a grandma who has custody?
Thank you.
So we have grandparents now who are independent providers, but they're a custodial grandparent.
Yeah, so there is a process in the rule for that instance where they can be the reimbursed caregiver, absolutely. That is allowable, and the rule outlines, what's required there. But certainly that is an allowable instance. It's just foster parents are very specifically prohibited federally.
There's been a rumor out there that grandma who has custody cannot remain an independent.
Right.
No, that's not correct. That rumor is incorrect. They are allowed, and there's a process to go through the rule. The rule outlines how that works, but there is a process. That rumor is incorrect. Thank you, Gary.
They're not going to get paid already. Double check that, yeah.
Oh, yes, thanks, Alan. I apologize. I need some new glasses. So we received a lot of comment on these particular provisions here. And so the intent of these provisions, we got some feedback, some concerns about how this process could go wrong. And so we did put some language in the rule related to those concerns. We have updated this language quite a bit since we initially inserted it. And I do want to say that these requirements are really Medicaid requirements anyway, for any provider. So generally speaking, the Medicaid provider who's being reimbursed has to actually deliver the care that they're getting reimbursed for during the time that they said they delivered the care. That's what it boils down to. So a provider, whether it's just an agency who's unrelated completely, or whether it's the parent, they can be billing during the time period where they're doing something other than the care they said they're delivering. So for example, work from home. You know, if you're working from home from, you know, like an office type job or something, then you're billing for your office job at the same time you're billing for Medicaid reimbursement. I mean, that's not allowed. It would be allowable, again, for someone who is not legally responsible to do that. And that really is, again, just a general Medicaid requirement. And similarly, for child care for other children. It's not that, we did receive this question, it's not that if you're a parent, let's just hypothetically say you have one child on the waiver, and then, you know, additional children who are not on the waiver. It's not that you can't be a direct care worker for your child who's on the waiver. You can. So I want to make that very clear. Just because you have multiple children and only one's on the waiver, that does not preclude you from being a reimbursed direct care worker for your child who is on the waiver. But it does mean that for the time that you're billing for your child is on the waiver, again, you actually have to be delivering the care that you're telling us when you bill that we reimburse. So if you're doing, whether it's, you know, working at some other job or whether it's doing something completely different, like, you know, lawn care or something, or other child care, the time you're billing has to be time that you're actually delivering the care that we're reimbursing for. Hopefully that makes sense. That's the intent of these provisions. Even without these provisions, that's the Medicaid requirement anyway. But our intent, I just want to say it one more time because we got this question and I was a little stunned by it. This does not preclude a parent of multiple children, where only one of which or a portion of which are enrolled on the waiver. That parent can still be a direct care worker reimbursed through this rule. It's just they have to actually only bill when they're delivering the care that's required under the waiver.
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the process for the grandparents? You said it's a process that they have to go through.
Yeah, no, thank you. It does depend a little bit because there's different types of relationships, such as guardianship, power of attorney. There's several different types of legal relationships that can exist.
I'm one of those grandmothers, and she's just in my custody.
Thank you.
I'm one of those grandparents. She's in my custody, but her father is also on the custody paper. And I was told that I couldn't be her independent provider, but you mentioned something about the process that we would have to go through.
Well, so it depends. When you say custody, there are different types of legal relationships. And so it depends on that precise legal relationship. I understand, and I'm not the expert on this, but if there's a guardianship, you actually have to go to the court and get approval to become a paid caregiver. So if you haven't done that, you can't do this. So that's, for example, part of the process, one of the requirements. It really depends on that precise legal relationship that you have with your grandchild. We are planning on rolling out training and assistance to the SSAs and the counties because these type of questions we think will probably come up, and so that training is yet to come. But that kind of pass the rule, that type of sub-regulatory guidance and assistance in helping people is very vital, and this is the type of thing that would, I think, be covered in that type of training.
So I would need to get guardianship.
No, I didn't say that. I don't know your precise legal relationship with your granddaughter, and I don't know that we have to get into it here. But it depends is the answer, and once after January 1, once these kind of parameters are effective, both in state rule and through the federal Medicaid waiver authority, once CMS approves it, The training for the SSAs then would have already occurred as well, and there'll be ongoing support, I'm sure. And so they'll be able to walk you through what's needed. Generally, though, I do want to say, I don't want to speak for the counties, but state agencies, we cannot give you legal advice ourselves, right? We're not allowed to give someone else legal advice. So it could be that you may need to consult an attorney depending on your instance, your relationship as well. But hopefully the counties will be able to help you once the process that kind of business process has been more developed. Thank you very much. Okay, so these are, again, general Medicaid parameters that are required of any provider. We did put these provisions in the rule because we did want to make clear, since we did hear some concerns on how this process could go wrong. But the intent is to not prevent someone from being a caregiver. It's just to make sure when they are a caregiver, they're delivering the service that we're reimbursing.
You didn't get your answer, did you?
Contact and visit requirements. So this gets to one of those assurances I mentioned yesterday. We do believe for legally responsible individuals, there needs to be a little bit more higher frequency of contact to really make sure we meet that federal health and safety assurance. So for legally responsible individuals, we are requiring a little bit more contact, but this is also part of the rule based on your feedback that we've changed over time. Initially, we had much more strict requirements, and we have less of those. So today where we're at is every 2-month contact, but it can be, some of the contact can be virtual or remote or telephonic, and then some in person. And it's also going to be in accordance with your person or your loved one's person-centered service plan as well.
They're not allowed providers.
And so it's much more flexible than it was originally. But again, in our opinion, to help ensure we're meeting the federal assurance that's required, we do think it's important to have a little bit more regular contact with the case manager, the SSA, than would maybe be standard if the provider was not also legally responsible.
What is this for?
So originally in the rule, in addition to there not being any other willing provider available, we also had language around employment. We got a lot of feedback that that language was not clear.
My chickens.
And so eventually we just removed that language entirely. Again, really based on your feedback. So this is no longer part of the rule. I do want to express that we have said several times that we believe this is a very good tool to address provider shortages. We all know there are provider shortages, and allowing a legally responsible individual to become a direct care worker absolutely helps to address those provider shortages. But it is not an employment rule. The purpose of the rule is to not find employment for someone. The purpose is to address provider shortages. But really, again, based on your feedback, we have removed all employment references in the rule. Based on your feedback again, we took out some language and replaced it. So we had best interest of the child originally in the rule, or best interest of the individual, and we changed it to health and safety. Health and safety is a federal assurance that the state promises CMS that we will meet. And so, based on your feedback, there were a lot of feedback that didn't like that particular clause, felt like it could be interpreted too broadly, and so we replaced it. Really, again, based on your feedback.
Did you get this out there?
Hmm?
So, you want to take questions now, Hal?
The juice, no, it's from home. Yeah, the juice.
So in the interest of time, I want to talk about the DODD changes first before we get to the questions. And we mentioned earlier that we, in addition to our Appendix K, unwinding parent as caregiver rules, we're also making some changes to shared living and residential respite. So through the Appendix K authority, individuals who are shared living providers have also been able to access HPC services on the same day as shared living. And we've heard a lot from families about the need and the desire to continue that this additional support the HPC provided on the same day was essential to them. So CMS will not allow this to continue in the way we had it during the pandemic, because they consider shared living and HPC to be duplicative services. We can't pay for two of the same services for the same person at the same time. However, we're attempting to address these needs through changes to shared living and residential respite. So first I want to talk about the shared living changes. And this addresses a question earlier that we are now allowing exemptions for individuals with some of the highest needs from having to utilize shared living, allowing them to receive HPC instead. So these exceptions include individuals who are assessed to need 2-to-1 staffing, assessed to need a wait staff present around the clock, or meet the criteria for the behavioral support or our complex care add-ons. Individuals who have been assessed to meet any of those criteria after January 1 will be able to choose to receive HPC instead of shared living. DODD, I will mention one change that we made just to emphasize it. We heard from stakeholders on the importance of this exemption for individuals who meet the behavioral support add-on. In our previous rule draft had required people to meet both the behavioral support and the medical add-ons to qualify for this exemption, and we've removed the need to qualify for the medical add-on. If you qualify for the behavioral support add-on alone, that is enough to meet this exemption and choose to receive HPC. We did not add in the medical add-on as its own exemption at this time, but it is something we're going to review as we're implementing the rule and ensure that we have not kind of left people behind who need the additional support that the HPC service will provide, and consider that in the future.
So let me get this straight. You can have a behavioral add-on and do HPC, but not the medical?
Yes. So just so that people didn't hear that from microwave, or the microwave? The microphone. Boy, I am a little hungry. After January 1, if you qualify for the behavioral support add-on, you will be able to choose to receive HPC instead of shared living. That is not true for the medical add-on.
Why is that?
So what we heard from stakeholders was that really the support, the additional HPC support they needed was for behavioral needs generally. And so we think that the complex care add-on will capture individuals whose medical needs are so high that they will qualify for the exemption. And that is an additional criteria that on its own will allow people to qualify. So either the behavioral support or the complex.
So that would be your feeding tube, your breathing treatment, that kind of stuff.
I know.
So for people who remain in shared living,
I have a hard time
comply with federal
understanding
regulations,
their
we
words
will
now.
now be allowing
I have to
residential
make-
respite
I gotta
service
clear.
as an
I
alternative
don't understand that.
to offering HPC on the same day as shared living.
I'm slow.
This is
like that.
allowable because residential respite is a specific, or is a different service because of its specific purpose to offer relief to the caregiver. And so we are making a number of changes to residential respite. Residential respite will be then allowed to go on the same day as shared living. There are limitations on that, and I can't believe I don't have that on the slide or off the top of my head, but I will get that information and give it to you. Thank you. So we're increasing the residential respite rates first to closely match those of HPC. And we're also introducing a 15-minute unit billing unit to be used in conjunction with shared living. And we will be allowing independent providers now to offer residential respite and to deliver it at the individual's residence as well. So this will allow shared living providers to bill on the same day as residential respite is billed, as long as the 15 units are billed, and to receive some support and some relief moving forward.
I have a question regarding this. Is this just for families or is it for all shared living?
It is for all shared living.
So we can go to someone else and get residential respite if we needed it for our clients. On the same day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is not a family-only requirement.
Okay.
Yes. Can you come to the microphone, possibly?
One of the major questions is, can the residential respite provider be someone that lives in the home of the shared living provider and the individual they support?
Right now, the rule draft says no, that the residential respite provider cannot be someone who lives in the shared living home. Yeah. Yes.
That's mine too. What's going to qualify my current HPC provider as a respite provider?
So we're working on kind of an expedited process to allow people who are HPC providers to qualify to be residential respite providers.
And what if, might they not qualify for that?
I'm sure there's some circumstance that exists where they couldn't, but I can't imagine what it would be. So I expect that they all would, but it's just going through the certification process to add that.
My other option is to not bill for that day and not get paid.
Right.
My question would be, I provide shared living for my son. My oldest son provides HBC for him on the weekends. I have to get him prepared, my son, who receives care, in the morning, pack all his things, meal prepping and all that. Can I still bill for shared living until my son comes and picks him up for the HBC for the weekends? I'm just trying to get clarity.
So your son will not be able to bill HPC after January 1 if you bill on shared living the same day. But you would be able to bill shared living on those days and have your son bill residential respite after January 1.
So that he would need to have that added on, pay to have that added on, that's correct?
Yes.
Can I ask, is there any thought of or like as you guys seem to be looking at the ODDP assessment, like when I look at the complex care add-on, my daughter is kind of one item short of that list. So what I've been told is because she can take assisted steps, like I have to be next to her and assist, but because she can take those steps, she's not considered complex care. Everything else on that list, she qualifies for. She has a medical add-on because she has a G2, but so it's this, there's just always this feeling of like, oh, we're almost that, but even, like, it's all so hard, it's all so there, but it's never, we never quite have the right, we have all these things going on, but it's never the right combination of things. So I didn't know if there was any, looking at like what qualifies as complex care as part of that.
Yes, please. So I'm going to give a microphone, or maybe if you want to go to a microphone to Naoka. Naoka Kyle is the Assistant Deputy Director in our Medicaid Division.
Hi, everyone. Hello. So I just wanted to, this was actually just brought to my attention, and I think that we could definitely look at that either through training or TA if possible. If not, we could certainly look at changing the criteria for the complex, because it sounds like there's maybe just some tweaking that needs to go on to improve those criteria just a little bit. But some of it may just be training and technical assistance. So we definitely, that was just brought to my attention. I think we could work on that a little bit.
Okay, so like if come January, we would want, so
wait, am I getting confused? Is this another change that happens in January?
You're right, Jan.
Okay, so what would be my step to address that come January? Like, what do I
You
as a
wouldn't need
mom?
to do anything. It's just something else that I think we need to, now that we're aware of it, I think we can work on that.
But I guess I'm saying, I do not expect my SSA to come to me and say, oh, right.
Right.
No, you were wrong. Right.
We would make some improvements and roll that out to.
Okay, so I should just ask the question again?
Well, give us a little time.
Yeah, no. Yeah, okay, understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
So my daughter was eventually, despite asking for a long time, thanks to Becky, approved for the Appendix K last August. So when we did her review in April, she was approved for 10 hours a weekend through the duration of her ISP. So given that we're not sure whether the respite's gonna come into play during that time, should I utilize her hours before November to not risk losing them? And then would additional ones be given? Do I risk and not use them all and try to hope that I have some to use from November to April?
So, so I'm not sure I fully understand the question. So she was approved for 10 hours
Each week.
each week.
From April 23 to April 24.
Okay.
This will end, Appendix K will end in November.
Yes, but she should then be able to qualify for
The remaining
residential-
hours?
She should be able to use the residential respite, or 10 hours of residential respite after January 1. So I don't think you will lose anything by using those hours now.
Well, from November to January, I should use those before November.
So,
December
no, so the Appendix K,
If
has,
there's a hand
CMS
microphone,
extended the
so my
Appendix
phone to
K
get the
authority
question.
through January. So there's no gap from November to January.
But then from January to April, it'll just flip over to the rest of it.
Yes, that would be.
Thank you.
Hi, my question is, when you're talking about that extraordinary care rule for the minors, you're giving the parents the ability to bill 40 hours a week. But if my daughter, she's an adult, and I have the exception because she's very complex care and behavioral and 24/7. But I'm limited by the 20% rule, and 20% of 24/7 care is only 33.6 hours. So why is it that someone with a minor can bill 40 hours, but someone with an adult can only bill 33.6?
So, but I think I heard you say that you think she'll meet the exception. So then you will not, so then you will bill HPC instead of shared living, and your HPC billing would then be limited by the overtime rule instead of the shared living rule. So that's going to change.
There's a lot of shared living, having HBC providers come in.
And I just wanted to add, so on the 40-hour limitation for parents of minor children, for legally responsible individuals, let me give you an example. The 40 hours is a limitation, but there is another limiting factor, which is the person-centered service plan and how many hours are authorized. So, for example, if you only have 30 hours authorized, the caregiver rule doesn't mean you get 40, right? You're still limited to that 30 that's been authorized in your person-centered service plan. It's a limitation to not go over 40 as a legally responsible individual, but it's still in accordance with that authorization from the service plan.
Okay. I'm going to ask what she was going to ask. But I also want to stress, I think there's some confusion between the legally responsible rule and the shared living rule. You can only be in shared living if you're an adult on the IO waiver. So block out what we said about legally responsible. That doesn't apply to adults, especially adults on shared living. And the cap on the number of hours per week is for independent providers, not for agencies. So an agency could get authorized to support someone for 100 hours a week, and if you work for an agency as an agency CEO, I'm not going to want you to work more than 40.
Right.
But sometimes you have to, and if you have to, an agency has to pay you time and a half. The question that Beth was going to ask is the permission from a probate judge to be both guardian and provider. That only applies to the DD side of the house, not to the Medicaid side of the house for the home care waiver. We've got home care waiver people in here as well. And then she followed that up by saying, where is the rule for that? We know when there's a Supreme Court decision, is there an accompanying rule that says, if you're a DD provider, a parent, and a guardian, where is the rule? Or is it just the Supreme Court decision?
Unless Alan knows, I'm not sure about the rule piece.
We're just going to enforce what the Supreme Court told us to do 10 years ago. Is that fair? Okay.
Right.
Well, I don't want to, I mean, there could be a rule that I'm just not familiar with.
What? That's a pository thing.
And I do apologize. Some of you may not know, I'm really no longer new, but I've only been in Ohio about a year and a half. So some of these historic things I'm a little less familiar with, so I apologize. I actually came here from Indiana. Very happy to be here. So some of these things are a little less.
No, thank you. We've just been telling people, the Supreme Court said you had to do it about 10 years ago. We're now enforcing what the Supreme Court said. In the past, DD said, we really don't have a rule. That's up to the Supreme Court. So we've acknowledged we're going to enforce the justices.
And just for the caregiver rule again, so I don't want to share living, I'm not commenting on that, just on the caregiver rule. I have heard some comments too that there's confusion of whether or not an individual can have another provider. Does that 40-hour limitation mean that that's all they're authorized to get? And the answer is no. That's just a limitation on the legally responsible individual. You can have an additional provider. It's still in accordance with your person-centered service plan. So just hypothetically, say an individual is authorized for 50 hours. They have a separate provider who's delivering 20 hours a week. That means the legally responsible individual would be limited to 30 hours because that's the difference between what the other provider is delivering and where there's that gap up to 40 hours, then the individual can fill that. But you can't have more than one provider if one of those providers is also yourself as a legally responsible individual. I have heard a couple questions like that, so I just want to make sure people know you can have another provider, even if you are providing yourself through the caregiver.
Go ahead, Patty.
If a provider is needing to add the residential respite to her certification, is DODD going to be waiving that fee?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was that? Yeah. They said they were.
So we're, I don't know. We're working through that process.
Okay. Could there be some consideration?
Good
We'll have to take that
answer.
into
Difficult.
They said they were. A couple of my meetings.
I thought it was just automatic.
Yeah, they were going to automatically make us all HCC.
That's what we said a few minutes
We
ago.
spent the last 6 months dealing with this crap. Rule 66 is, period, no matter who you are, if you are a legal guardian, that rule came into effect because it was a conflict of interest for you to be making money plus being the guardian. That rule applies no matter what agency, who it is, or anything else, period. ODA, ODM, DODD, everybody has to abide by Rule 66. And most counties have the form online, they can print it, mail it. The court don't want to see that. They just mail it, they'll sign it, they'll send it back, and that'll make the Supreme Court happy and everybody's asleep.
Rule 60, what's Rule 66?
That's the Supreme Court rule. You'll never find it.
Can I give you the information on my last slide and then have one other question?
And then we're
So,
gonna eat.
I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned the changes from the Federal CARES Act as well, which allows personal care services to be delivered in the hospital. So we are amending our DODD waivers to allow shared living, HPC, and participant-directed HPC to be provided to an individual during a stay in the acute care hospital. It's not a substitute for services the hospital is obligated to provide, but it's for services on top of that. And there are going to be some service limits, which is no more than 30 days for waiver eligibility span, and no more than 16 hours of HPC or participant-directed HPC per day. But after January 1, this will be allowable billing as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Trying to read this there. If you have somebody come in to apply relief respite, okay, so you have somebody coming and give you relief respite, do they also get the medical add-on? If you have a behavior add-on, do they get the behavior add-on when they're coming in and doing relief?
No, so we have updated our respite rates, and those draft rates are on our website, and they're in line with the HPC, but we do not have the add-ons for that service.
Okay, even if the child's a 2-on-1, they won't get that behavior add-on?
Right.
Okay, and then the other question is, which I'm trying to understand it here. The HPC will be based on the need of the individual. Is the HPC going to be based on the need of the individual? Somebody's afraid of getting pushback from their SSAs about the budget. So if they're getting pushback, do you understand the question, Marianne?
No.
No. Oh, thanks.
I think just what you're saying, I think they're concerned that they're gonna get pushed back, like not allowed to have these things, some real fights to get these services. Is that what that sounds like?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It just says she's afraid this is going to get pushed back to our county when she goes for the HPC.
Right, that you may have these rules and that these sound real good, but then there's gonna be a lot of roadblocks put up so people can't access it. That's what it sounds like.
So the first thing I want to say is we have gotten some questions from individuals whose SSAs may not have known that we were updating the funding ranges for the waivers, and so concerned that they're going to have to reduce services with the higher rates to stay within the waiver limits. And so we have put out communications about the increased waiver limits. So hopefully that information is getting around more. The only other thing I'd add to that is if you do have these sorts of concerns, please feel free to reach out to our Medicaid waiver technical assistance team. Our role there is to help with implementation of the Medicaid waivers and to make sure that the families and individuals and counties are getting the information they need to correctly apply these rules.
So we can do 2 more questions.
I have a question about shared living. So I'm my son's shared living provider. And the rule is that if I provide 20%, then I qualify of his care, whatever, I qualify for the shared living. When I looked up if I could do HPC, like take a friend of his and go to the zoo together, like the 2 of them, it said that my shared living would actually be, like part of it would be taken away from him. I wouldn't make the full. So since I only need to be shared living provider for 5 hours in order to meet the law, the AOC code, or why is it taken away from me? Because I would meet that 3 times over. Say we went 4 hours to the zoo, I would have, all the 20 hours. So I would easily meet the requirements of a full day of shared living. So can you explain to me why you would take money away from me in that scenario?
I can answer it.
So,
Does his friend have a waiver?
Yes, the friend would,
Okay,
like if
so
I
you
was-
would be doing a group, you would bill at a group rate.
But it would only be.
let's let the speaker.
It doesn't matter.
respond.
So I think that the answer there is correct, because you're going to have to be billing at a group rate because you're providing services to the 2 individuals.
4 hours, so if I do 4 hours of
it
him
sucks.
with a friend, but isn't it
Absolutely
just
sucks.
4 hours for the group?
I can't even do it for free.
Well, so shared living is not an hourly service, and so.
That's safety.
It is only the daily.
Yeah, that's
rate, so
recording.
Yes.
Yeah.
We will
It
have
will
24
sucks.
hours.
Okay, will it be that way for
That's it. Plan it. It absolutely sucks.
Like, would I be able to take a friend and go do an activity with them and still be able to have my shared living rate for the day?
So you
I can't
can't,
take Eric's
so
friend and
another
his
provider
roommate.
would have to be billing that.
I have one for because he's his own guardian.
As the.
And doesn't receive county money,
Okay,
so
so
they're
I
not
would-
supervising.
so if I
There's
take
other
him
thing
from
that needs supervision only. I can't take him with us, or I have to bill a group rate.
I just want to be
To the
clear,
movies or
that's the
anything.
rule, right? You'll take money from us if I help out another
Yeah,
family, if
before.
I'm providing services of what I'm certified with the state to do.
So,
kid
I
with
mean,
20
let me get that
hours
through, you would be,
supervision, and it's all
you're asking if you could
supervision.
then bill respite, to provide the services to
Well, I
the
just-
other individual,
The
at
shared
the
living.
day one.
No, I'm questioning the 100% of shared living because I'm meeting the criteria like 3-4 times over to receive a full day of shared living. And so I just don't understand why you take shared living away when it's a daily rate and it's, the requirement's only 20%. That's just what I question. I just want to make sure I'm clear because it doesn't make any sense.
So because you are providing the group service during the
For 4
period,
hours.
that is what you're gonna have to know.
Okay, and who makes that law?
So right now, it is part of the state regulations. I'm hearing your frustration with it. So
No, I
it's
just want to
something-
know who I need to talk to
So
next.
it's DODD, it's us. So we can have further conversations about, if that is the right way that we should be doing this, but right now, that is
That's
the way
okay.
it happens.
So it's you guys.
Yes.
So I'm
Even if
You
I
are.
was to as his provider, I would have to take a group rate for myself.
Personal care at the
Yeah.
hospital.
Yes.
So we're in the hospital.
I'm sorry, what?
Now I'm going to rehab for,
Alan is, the man with the microphone. Yeah. He's from Medicaid.
one of my girls is just when I have she's in the hospital now. So her rehab part she goes to, is that for 30 days she can also sub out for?
I think it's only while you're in the acute care hospital. I'm looking at Nyoka and Joanne to confirm that. Yes, so no, you do not. It's only while you're in the acute care hospital.
Also, I do Ohio Share Living. I work with a different individual HPC, so her Ohio Share Living can't bill. I was told that I can't bill mine Ohio Share Living when I do services for this other lady for HPC, even though it doesn't have nothing to do with mine Ohio Share Living. Is that true or false?
So,
So I serve, I have Ohio Share Living for
Can you say that?
one
It's
person.
clear from all
I do
these people there's a
HPC for
problem with the Ohio
this
Share
person.
Living.
yes.
Because you're
Her
boss.
Ohio Share loses hers, am I supposed to lose
I'm
mine
gonna,
also?
that topic makes me
So
so
the
You may
angry.
want to
answer is
bring it to
generally
their
no,
attention
you
that
can't,
you're hearing all these problems.
Billing for providing services to someone else while you're also billing share provider.
Even,
I don't know how.
so, okay, so it doesn't matter that my person has nothing to do with this person that I'm working with.
Yes.
Well, no, like, so, I have my own person that I do my share living, so now
More services, you want to put check mark every day. And we have a budget for that. We have our budget plus we can
why does it affect mine for
monitor,
Sarah?
we can act with 1%
So I
patient.
think the idea, if I'm understanding it correctly, I think the idea is that you can't be billing for providing shared living on one day to one person and also HPC to a different person on the same day.
Okay, so regardless, it doesn't matter, both of them, so her Ohio share living loses hers, and I lose mine to do these services for this person.
Yes, except that after January
Right,
1,
the rest.
yes.
Okay.
Now, if that's
Thank
what
you. That's
I
it.
think
We're now going to take a lunch break. There are two buffet tables back